in the book, we talk about this idea that your money blueprint forms very early. But a lot of times people think your money blueprint is only related to your parents. It actually goes back to your grandparents.
No one's going to promote you quicker than you. That was the thing.
That's
that
powerful.
Just coming down off Hammersmith flyover, just coming down in the car. I remember I had that sort of burgundy Astra from, and I remember saying that to myself on my way to work.
And I realized that money, if used properly as a tool, can help to buy back time and create a particular vision, life's vision. And it's not a mindset I'd grown up with. You know, it took reading books and reading American blogs and
Rich Dad, Poor
just
Dad.
just being in different spaces. A pound could become £2 in 10 years by simply having it in the right environment. In the same way, 10 grand can become 20 grand. So a big shift we need to have in terms of how we create almost community wealth is that shift from me to we.
Thank you for joining us on another Business of Church podcast. You've got myself, there's Stewart, and
Cory Belfon.
And we are your hosts as always. We enjoy bringing you this stuff. We always bring it to you because there's so much good stuff that comes out of these podcasts. We have such amazing guests, and we've got a guest today. We was hoping his wife would come with him. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it, but we've got Ken
Okoroafor.
And I don't know if you can zoom in on this. Am I on the right camera?
Hey.
Yeah, zoom in on this book here, Financial Joy, and also the humble penny.
Yes.
So I'm gonna pronounce your name correctly, but let me.
Okoroafor, you did well. Come on.
Hey. Give me a round of applause.
Benefit of working with the people that we work with.
Come on. You did well.
Absolutely. We're gonna talk a little bit about this book today. We're gonna talk about how we can improve financial health within communities, within our faith groups, and so on. In fact, what I love about today, Ken is also a man of faith.
Yes.
Certainly a man of faith, and we'll delve into some of that. So in fact, let me just start with, have we got a pen? I want my book signed.
Hey,
have we got a pen on the table?
Signing.
Just under there. There we go. Let's start with a book signing. This book will be on eBay before you know it. Well, it won't, not until your wife signs it.
I'm excited to be here, man.
Excellent. Okay.
All right. Let's get
Perfecto. Lovely. Start as we mean to continue.
You can see it's not his first signing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We've been signing like hundreds, probably even a few thousands of these books because we had to do them for the book launch and everything else. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was going through the book as you do to try and prep, and it became more than just prepping. There were some insightful things in there.
Yeah.
Some of which I do. And it's funny when there was a point in there where it got to what type of person are you?
Yeah.
Are you the grinder?
Yeah.
And I started to shed a tear.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It was like, oh my God, this is me.
Your money persona.
That's the one, right? And some really, really good stuff in there. And so thank you. It was really,
you're welcome.
Really inspirational.
Good. Good.
How did your journey down anyway?
It was all right. Yeah? I've had a slight bumpy morning, but apart from that, it was good, man.
Okay.
I've never been to this part of London, so I'm kind of like, wow, this is new. I'm kind of like, wow, I didn't know this place existed.
You was up East. You grew up in East London?
I grew up in the UK. I grew up in East London. Then moved to Southeast, but I've never really ventured out to where we are. Yeah.
Oh, wow. In fact, most of your time you spend going to Gatwick and venturing that way.
Yeah, it's more exactly. It's literally more like airport, go somewhere, fly back in, or London Bridge, Charing Cross,
Well, glad I could help to.
Exactly.
Spread your knowledge of London a little bit more.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay, so let's just jump in. Tell us a little bit about I mean, obviously we got the book here, Financial Joy, but I want a little bit about Financial Joy and a little bit about the Humble Penny and how you and your wife work together. Let's give everybody a bit of an intro.
Good. So let's go back a bit. So 2017 is where the Humble Penny began life. I used to work in finance, a 14-year career in the financial services industry, working in the investment business as a chief financial officer. But whilst I was doing my work, I always felt that I felt like there's an emptiness that I had in me and I wanted to do something else. And that emptiness really was pronounced a lot more when I was on a flight to the US for work. So I had to fly into America every 3 to 6 months for work. And I was on this flight and I felt just this lead to try to start something else, start to share what Mary and I'd been learning, my wife Mary and I'd been learning on our journey. And I was brainstorming some thoughts on there when we, on that flight, and when I got back home, brainstormed with Mary as well. That's where the Humble Penny as an idea began.
Right.
And the Humble Penny is a platform that we use to educate people financially about money. We wanted to do it from our perspective as a family who have an immigrant background, who are raising children in and around London, having grown up here with many challenges, whether it's from the career perspective, family perspective, immigrant perspective. But ultimately, we wanted to achieve financial independence and wanted to share that journey with people. So the Humble Penny began as effectively a passion project, a 99p blog that we were just writing on every week.
Okay.
And I did it alongside my day job whilst working.
Yeah, you see, I'm thinking, so what is it that was in you that made you think, you wanted to express that, this sort of passion to, why did you want to tell people about finance and so on and so forth? Because I asked only because for me, it's really, the sliding scale between you're working for somebody versus doing your own thing. What is that thing that was inside you?
It's a few things, actually. So I've grown up in an entrepreneurial family.
All right.
Obviously, moving to the UK, getting a normal job wasn't really straightforward. It's probably the most polite way to put it. So being an entrepreneur was the more natural thing to do because no one really asked you anything. It was more like, you can just set up a company or buy a company or like whatever.
Yeah.
So I'd see my parents doing a lot of that, and I often wondered, And my mum would always say, you should never really rely on just one income. You should just always have your own thing doing. So at the back of my mind, I always had this desire to want to do something where I could bring together all the blessings I felt God's given me, all my learnings, all my experiences. I could bring it together fully into something that I would put my full energy into.
So your culture.
Yeah, I was going to say, because is it that your parents back home, they did a lot of trade? Did they actually trade back home?
Oh, loads, yeah. They even traded to survive the Civil War.
Right.
The Biafra War in Nigeria was a very, very challenging war. Let's just put it that way. Many people lost their lives. My parents had to trade everything: yams, fish, anything they could trade as a way to survive that war. So trading, in fact, in my last name, Okoroafor, stands for a young man born on a third trading day.
Okay.
That's what it means, on the third market day. So trading has been inbuilt into my culture, my upbringing.
Because I always say we're an imprint of our parents in many respects. They're the first influences that we see.
Oh, absolutely.
And as such, one of the things that I found when you look at the sort of the African diaspora and children coming, next generation of children coming from that, they always seem to have that sort of trade mentality, even if it's a hustle. Even if it's a street hustle, they have that.
It's a survival thing as well, because again, I talked about safety net earlier when we were like off, before the recording. It's a survival thing because you have to create some security somehow for yourself when there isn't a safety net. and buying and selling is a very natural thing for people, particularly if you are, like you say, in an environment where there isn't a lot of restrictions. Kind of like you see someone selling slippers here, you can buy it for £10 or $10 or 10 naira. You can sell it for 15 or 20 in another place.
Of course.
It's easy. It's kind of like, it's quite an easy thing. And it's a mindset that we've inherited. In fact, in the book, we talk about this idea that your money blueprint forms very early. But a lot of times people think your money blueprint is only related to your parents. It actually goes back to your grandparents. Like if you really want to understand what your true relationship with money is and where it began, you have to trace it back to your grandparents.
Okay.
Because they influenced your parents. Like I had to interview Mary and I had to interview our parents, who thank God are still alive, to understand their relationship with money, which was very deeply ingrained in how their parents looked at money, what their attitudes to money were, what their trades were, what was their job, what sort of business did they do, how did that influence you and your choices, and how has that influenced me and my choices. So you need to go 2 generations a bit deeper. So we say, if you really want to understand, if your grandparents are not around anymore, speak to people who knew them. Like, what were their attitudes to money, and how does that relate to how you look at money today, for example?
Yeah, I did that exercise actually. I couldn't interview my grandparents, God rest their soul, but I'd certainly looked at my father and how he is with money.
Interesting.
And him, my mother, great savers. Don't spend. Almost literally, don't spend anything on yourself ever.
Interesting. Okay.
Buy your house.
Okay.
And pay for that. Have a good pension. Yeah. And I won't say the other one.
Yeah. Okay.
I've spoken about that before. Okay. But anyway, literally, when I look at them and I look at my grandfather, or certainly one set of my grandparents, they enjoyed buying land.
Interesting.
And they enjoyed having land that they could give to members of family.
Okay. Wow.
So when I look at all of that, and I look at myself, and I always remember my dad having a joke at me one time where I must have been about 12 or something. I had a paper round, and I had a Chelsea Building Society just up by near North End Road. And every weekend I'd get my little money and I'd put it in that building society. And my dad would say, when you're opening your bank book, you're always going like this.
Wow.
Looking in it. And I'd have £100 and, you're 12 and it's like, But, I actually did do that exercise.
Interesting.
And it was interesting.
Yeah, no, I've learned a lot about myself. And the beauty of it is when you learn something when you learn about your finances from your parents and grandparents, I almost think of it as like a version 1.0. So it can change, your relationship with money can improve. It can become something else, but it requires having a different set of tools for that for that change to actually happen. So that's where the Humble Penny began. And then Financial Joy actually started as a tagline for the Humble Penny. The Humble Penny's tagline is create financial joy. That has always been our mission. But during COVID, we founded Financial Joy Academy. We wanted, because a lot of people kept approaching us after we started our YouTube channel, like, can you offer me coaching, blah, blah. But our coaching can sometimes be expensive for people one-to-one. So we wanted to create something that's much more accessible, cheaper than takeaway bills for a lot of people. And we founded Financial Joy Academy. And out of that mission to bring financial joy to the world kept expanding. And in 2022, it's funny, in December 2022, we were just, Mary and I were like doing our end of year, like, what we're going to do next year. God, imagine if we wrote a book. That would be incredible one day. 12 days after that, the second largest book publisher in the world reached out to us to say, we've been following you, love your YouTube channel, love your work. Would you like to put your ideas into a book? And that was the beginning of this book, Financial Joy. We thought it was spam initially. We ignored the email. We didn't know who they were. We had to go and research them. We found out they were real, and we started having a chat. So,
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Useful book it is too, I can honestly say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The part of the book that I kind of found interesting was the sort of the journey. So, you guys, you meet, you're working and so on. But the part that sort of jumped out at me was, you working so hard that you collapsed.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, what is that guy doing? that he's because I can work, but for me to collapse, I would have had some serious amount of sacrifice in terms of sleep, etc., etc.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about that.
So that was really about exhaustion and overwork. So in
mental exhaustion.
Yeah, mentally and physically, actually. Yeah. In the type of work I was doing, a lot of your brain power was really spent on financial models and working long hours. Like I'd leave home at maybe 6:30 in the morning, and on a day that I've really worked too long on stuff, if we're working on a massive project or raising money, so I worked in the venture capital business. I might work till maybe 10:30 in the evening, and then leave and then travel home, which would be another 2 hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Wow.
And I might get home 12:30-ish, try and get some sleep, and then try and leave again at 6:30 to begin. And when you've done that a few days and you're really mentally spent as well as physically spent, and that usually what happens is when that happens, you also start to deprive yourself from a nutrition perspective. You might not be eating really well. You might be stopping off at a station to grab the odd thing that you find at London Bridge or whatever. Just kind of eat on the go. Your timings for your food is also a mess because you're just eating at weird times.
Not getting to the gym.
Not good. Exactly. You're not fit. So I was in that cycle basically, and there was a cost to that. And the cost was that I got home one day way past midnight. Not only do you have the loneliness aspect as well, because it's cold, it's, you're just in this weird place where you haven't really spent time with your loved ones. You've just been in this work mode, and your work is not necessarily really appreciated, and you're much more likely to make mistakes. As accountants, you can have a fat finger moment where you, in a cell in your Excel sheet, you mistakenly type a plus sign when you should be a minus. So your decimal point, and your deal, your financial model, and this happened, and I'm speaking from experience. The entire financial model spits out a completely different number that might then lead to decision making, and if that deal isn't accepted, you come back to be the one that fingers are pointed to. So there's almost like a knock-on effect, not only on your health personally, which for me meant that I actually collapsed. I had a physical, just fainted.
Your body just
banged my head in that was in the book we call it a point of no return event. And I've had various ones, everything from being made redundant to, being, threats for deportation. I've had all these things as somebody trying to navigate this country. And that was one of those moments for me, was collapsed. Thankfully, my wife was in the room because it was in our ensuite bathroom. And she would run up and try to bring me up, to try to help me not to panic. I had a cut here just below my beard and on my head as well. And it was just a weird thing because it's kind of like, sometimes in life it's weird how it takes certain extreme events for you to kind of pause and think, wait, what's going on? What's all this about? These people I'm putting these mad hours for, do they even really appreciate me, man? Or could I be doing this life a bit differently?
No, I could see that. I mean, I was talking to these guys earlier. I was saying that, for me, in my entrepreneurial sort of journey, there's two key moments. I can see myself driving and saying to myself, these phrases, I don't know, for you, it's like you have these conversations with yourself and they stick with you. So the first one for me was, no one's going to promote you quicker than you. That was the thing. That's that powerful. Just coming down off Hammersmith flyover, just coming down in the car. I remember I had that sort of burgundy Astra from, and I remember saying that to myself on my way to work. And then the other one was when I was coming to meet you guys, down the A40, meet you guys in the BBC, and I'm thinking to myself, if you really believed in what you're doing, because you're doing it as a side hustle, we've been doing it for a few years in part time. And I was going to meet Des and Lloyd. And I remember just having that conversation thinking, if you really believed in what you were doing, You know,
why not go all in?
Exactly. What are you waiting until you've got kids and you've got a mortgage and you've got things? What are you waiting for? Because that time I was living at home with my parents. I was thinking to myself,
best time
exactly. I goes, you got nothing to lose. I goes, if you really believe you would leave your job and do this full time. And when I turned up, I said to those guys, look, I just need £1,000 a month, so we all chip in, and if we could raise £6,000 amongst us, 6 months. If it's not working in 6 months, then I could always go and find another job. And we
probably
never
one of the best conversations we had, actually.
Yeah,
because then that spurs you on to the planning.
Yes,
because now you need to have that money.
Yeah.
Do you know what I love about that is that you had a very clear goal that was a monetary amount. So a lot of time people are like, oh yeah, I want to get to a certain place, but they have this annual amount. But if you make it monthly and you're like, you know what, it's 1K a month or it's 3K a month, it feels a lot more urgent.
And also feels a lot more doable.
Yes.
Because sometimes, I mean, we sit down now and we look at the big picture and we've got this big figure that we sit down and we think about. But we've had experience of being able to hit the smaller figures, grow on a month-by-month basis. So the bigger figures is real to us. But you're right. Just having that, setting yourself a goal, making it clear, and it also being achievable. Yeah.
Tell me about that dinner that I sorted out with Graham and those guys. Yeah, I remember.
I do remember. We went for dinner,
Yeah.
and they said to us about the number.
So we're sitting down in this. It's a friend of mine. He's an investment banker, chief investment officer, and he arranged like a dinner with some of his friends, his sort of experienced businessmen and so on and so on. We just wanted to sort of have a chat about a few ideas, etc. And we're sitting there, and one of them, one of the sort of more experienced businessmen, he goes, "All right, so so what's your number?"
This was before we actually even knew a number needed to exist.
Exactly right. So I look at so normally if you're sort of like a business person, you're in meetings. There's times where you kind of think quickly, and you become pretty good at being able to sort of interpret on the fly what somebody thinks. But Des and I just looked at each other like,
number?
What do you mean? It's like, number. What's your number? And then one of them told his story about my first number was like $1 million. I wanted to, etc. And it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I said, we don't really operate like that. It's not because where we have grown up and the sort of to think about those numbers was like. It was like just unrealistic to be thinking about those sort of numbers. So, and Des and I, we've never really been like greedy or sort of, I say greedy, but money driven.
Yeah.
We were doing it because in our early years when we was doing music or whatever the things that we were doing as a team to build something in an event or whatever. It was more either for the fun or for the notoriety or, it was those sort of things, or when you're a really young man, for girls or whatever your sort of silly little motivation. Right. Those got, but it wasn't so much about, I want money to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but,
Sorry, I think it was just because, I know, certainly for me, I always believed that money would come. I think if you did a great service, and I again, I kind of refer back to some of the things that you talk about when you're looking at blueprints, and I'd always seen us two, we've been together since we were down here.
Oh, wow.
So we've kind of always shared the same experiences anyway, whether I've been at his house having fantastic food and his mum was a fantastic cook, or he's been at my house with my dad, carrying on with all sorts. If he wasn't hitting a bit of wood, then he was disciplining me because I needed to hit the piece of wood. Yeah. But whatever the case is, my dad was a bit more of a trading guy. He'd go around, pack a bag of a whole, back then, a grip with all sorts of bed sheets and this, that, and the other, and go around and sell to friends and family, and I'd be carted around alongside with him. So I think I always had this belief that, I was going to just do something. And you always believe that there's somebody telling you when you was really young, you could be really great, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so there was this natural belief, and when we came together as friends, we just had this natural belief. We never thought about money in the way that, other people necessarily. We just believed it was going to happen for us at some point.
Yeah.
As long as we stayed together and did stuff together, it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to us, really.
That's interesting. I guess for me, I started thinking of money more intentionally when I realized that money if used properly as a tool, can help to buy back time and create a particular vision, life's vision. And it's not a mindset I'd grown up with. You know, it took reading books and reading American blogs and
Rich Dad Poor
just
Dad.
just being in different spaces for me to go, wow, like there's a different way of doing this whole thing, you know, that still means that I can still do my God-given calling. I can still do the things I want to do, but not have to worry about money so much. And that for me was very appealing, because it meant that if I could be diligent with what I have in my hands, and diligent with my career, and diligent with anything I was doing, a side business or whatever, but I wasn't just wasting money. For me, I wasted a lot of money as a 20-something-year-old. It took a while understanding that a pound could become £2 in 10 years by simply having it in the right environment. In the same way, 10 grand can become 20 grand by not doing very much. So it took certain mindset shifts for me to go, wow, this whole thing is actually a design problem. Life's actually about designs, problems and design solutions. If I can find a way of thinking, what's the problem and what's the design solution for it? I can create the life I want and do it for family members and do it for my parents and do it for, my children.
That's what I'm sorry. I was going to say that's what I really liked about the book, which is the idea that you're teaching the change of mindset. Doesn't matter how little you have. Start with the smallest amount, but just improve upon that a little bit each time.
That's what I was going to say. The mindset thing is the biggest challenge. Is discipline often enough is a good building block to be able to build anything. And if because there's times where Des and I will be talking to people about, I'm sure you've been there as well. You talk to somebody, you see all the great traits in them, and you talk. You can run a business. You can. There's things you can do. You could exactly, and Des and I finally sort of concluded, and this is sort of Des's lyric. You can't want more for people than they want for themselves.
Oh yeah.
And at some point, you have to say, well, look, I've given you the knowledge. What you do with it is up to you. And so it is it's kind of painful. So I kind of now understand what you mean about there's that yearning where you see and you think I can help you. I can see you've got potential. But sometimes it's just hard to unlock people and just.
And for some people, it's about seeing other people do things. I feel like Mary and I have become an ignition for a lot of people. They've been sitting dormant with a number of ideas and thoughts and, baggages and things they want to do. But having seen us take certain steps, they feel they too can do it. They feel like, wow, like if these guys could do it, I can do it too. So I feel like a big part of our work is just simply being seen.
Yes, because that whole role model thing is a visual a lot of the time. Just seeing somebody doing it, listening to somebody and thinking, okay, well, I don't have to carry myself a certain way and look a certain way to be able to accomplish a certain thing. But, I'm seeing somebody that looks like me, maybe. I'm not saying, obviously, you have a broader reach, but I'm just saying for a lot of people. And I notice sometimes when I'm out with my family and, my wife and my kids, and I'm driving or we're going somewhere or whatever, and I often will say to them, look, it's not just about us. We're a role model to other people. So, when people see you, they kind of look and think, oh, so maybe it is possible.
Oh, this is such a... There's a domino effect, I give you... Do you know how many times I get DMs from people who say, because I watched your video 5 years ago of you made a video saying you paid off your mortgage in 7 years. I've just paid off my mortgage. Literally, here's a screenshot. How should I feel right now? I've just done it. I've literally done what you guys said 5 years ago. What's my next step?
Oh, really?
It's them. They're literally like, honestly, I think it's so heartwarming to see that happen, because then it's like, wow, like just imagine what that's done. Think about, like, I just use the black community as an example. You look at the stats, very small percentages relative to other ethnicities when it comes to home ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's even smaller when you look at like how many people are no longer owning, having a mortgage on their homes. It's even a smaller percentage. So for me, the fact that even without meeting them in person, we've had that impact is huge.
Okay, so yes, all right. So we have a few. I mean, it's great to sort of just generally talk, but we've got a few sort of structured questions. So one of them here is, I mean, we've probably covered some of these. I'll ask it anyway, and if we feel like we've kind of covered it, then
the first one. So
yeah, that's what that's.
Huh? I don't think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, how do you build community wealth? So, take a moment to think about that. Community wealth, because at the moment, a lot of what you're doing is helping individuals sort out their own wealth. But how do you build community wealth?
So, I think that a big way you build community wealth actually begins with a big shift in mindset. So I just feel that at the moment, a lot of people subscribe to a very scarcity-driven mindset in that we always feel like, do you know what? There's only one piece of pie out there. And like, if I take one piece of it, I'm taking one away from you and you, right? And so that means I basically hoard information and ideas. I don't want to tell you because you're better off, and it will be like you're taking it from me. That's a very damaging mindset to have because it stops collective progress, right? Because we're just all about me, right? So I think the very beginning is like, how do we shift mindsets? How do we get people to like think beyond just like, oh, I've got £1,000, I want to just keep it in the bank, right? But instead think, well, actually, how can I either make this money grow or collab with you in a joint venture for something else to happen? And I think a lot of that mindset shift begins with things like just hearing other people talk about stuff that they've done. I just think mindset shifts happen through, things like having the right resources, whether it's like you're reading books, you're listening to podcasts or whatever. Listen to people you can relate to, share their lived experiences of how they've gone from this very limiting mindset to one where they are actually achieving quite big results by doing things differently. So a big shift we need to have in terms of how we create almost community wealth is that shift from me to we. How do we start to think we? And I think a big part of that begins at home. Take the example of, families, and siblings. Siblings. One thing I've grown up with, and I credit to my parents, is they've always said, if you're doing anything and is working out, take your siblings along with you. Yeah. Now, you might not want to do it because you've been bickering and arguing with your sibling, but as a collective mindset, a family, because it's been ingrained in us, I want to take my sisters along, and I call my brother and go like, hey, I just found this thing. You guys need to apply, or like this grant here. Look, apply. Or I've just met this PR person here. Here's their number. WhatsApp them. They'll connect you up. Or I'm going to my book launch. I'm going to be meeting a lot of industry heads. Come along. I've got you some VIP tickets. This is the we mindset, right? So there's that practical element, but I think it begins actually at home. In the same way that financial education, people say, oh yeah, schools. There should be more schools teaching this stuff. It actually should start in your home.
It's like
exactly. Literally that. It needs to start there. And then I think it's about, them modeling this in our lives outside of the family. So for example, and this is where trust comes in, because a big part of community wealth is a lack of trust. We see this in I'm picking them, we've got different communities in the Black community, but a big part of what I feel, we lack is trust in many ways, because if we had more trust for each other and we kept to what we said we were going to do,
do you think it was always that way? Because I
don't think it was always that way.
Remember partner and stuff like that. Our parents'
a big thing within the West Indian or Caribbean community, and certainly, my dad was part of and ran a partner. And that was based on trust. It was based on trust. It was based on the fact that you would, in the 20 weeks, even though you've taken your first draw from that you would still
carry on putting in.
And it worked well.
And
the other thing that worked well, so I think a lot of it's to do with maybe culture and when people first came, the Windrush generation that first came to the country only had each other to really be able to rely on. So, for instance, we were turning up here, and we were actually
something deeper. But
we were purchasing properties and things like that for our own to be able to live in, especially when, when my father and one of his cousins turned up and was received by another cousin who was here and purchased the house. The whole of the community, that's pretty much what happened. How that broke down.
Well, this is what I said. I was hoping it was something deeper, but maybe as people become more comfortable in a country and they start to build out their relationships, they become, like you said, less sort of dependent on each other.
Yep.
And so therefore, if you haven't got a strong culture keeping you guys together, I would say that, your culture would be, like you came over at 14, that's what I'm saying. It was ingrained. The culture is already there, so it's more difficult for it to dissipate.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe, the West Indian culture wasn't as robust, and so then in a shorter space of time, it dissipates more. So, it's easier if you become more westernized and you embrace it, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to know that sort of trust where you're in that melting pot and you depend on each other is no longer there. You need something else.
I think, sorry, I mean, ultimately, when you look at it, you look at Caribbean or West Indian cultures, you suggest reality is a lot of that is born out of slavery. That comes with its own issues. Whereas when you have a strong culture coming straight from motherland, and the that sort of indoctrination that you have, and that whole, hey, listen, it was tough there. Okay, I'm going to ride this out. I'm going to make something of myself, and I'm going to use all of the skills, everything that was literally taught in those early days.
Yeah.
Although you may not have seen it as a teaching back then, but it certainly built the resilience that you needed to be able to move on as a platform.
Yeah.
I think therein lies some of the differences.
So then, I don't know. I mean, you've listened to what you're saying. So when the West Indians come over, then they already had the trust within them to do the things like partner. So then it still doesn't. So you're saying that they lost that because they had it then.
What
so
it is I think it was born out of necessity.
Right. Okay. So it's just a necessity.
It was. That's what I think. I could be wrong. I think it's just born out of necessity, which is, I've come here, I've not been received very well by the indigenous population that are here. So therefore, we are going to have to do for ourselves, by ourselves. And as such, I've managed to get a property. I tell you what, you come and stay with me until you can afford to buy yours.
Still requires a love of oneself. What I'm saying? Because, I mean, you could still, I'm all right now. I'll see you later. Why didn't that happen?
You see, there's one thing, there's quite a few dimensions to this conversation. Think about community wealth. I'm going to just think about like my journey as an example. I use that to explain it. So I think of three things broadly. So there's mindset that I've talked about. There's skill set and there's tool set. So things like the partner system is a tool set effectively. But that tool set's connected to a culture. I'm going to use my upbringing as an example. Yeah. So I come from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria. The Igbo people have what they call the Igbo apprenticeship system, where if I start a business,
give it a name.
If I start a business, it's required of me in the community that I take what I've learned and I find somebody who is within the community and I teach them that trade. They come under me as an apprentice and then they'll go off one day and start a business in that same space. And they'll do the same for somebody else and they'll do the same for somebody else, and it carries on that way. This is how the community, wherever they go in the world, whether you find Igbo people in London, in the UK or Canada, or wherever, back in the day, this was practice. And it's still informally still being practiced today. What am I saying there really? What I'm saying there really is that a tool set is connected ultimately to culture in many ways. Yeah. So I think about my parents, they have a better social life than I do. They're in their 70s, and I'll tell you why. Every other weekend, they go into parties and community events. Their age group have a thing where they're always meeting up. That person just turned 60, that person's turned 70, or they have like a village party, like a kind of a community meetup, and they sit down and talk about like how they're building this well and how they're building this school and how they're building this thing in this village and in that village. But they're doing it for community interest. Now, what's interesting about that is if you pair that with skill sets, you got tool set, skill set, mindset. If you pair that with skill set, if everybody is really upskilling and leveling up in different ways. Imagine I had skills of managing, investing, entrepreneurship, and what have you. Somebody else had skills in the legal trade, accountancy, and somebody else had skills in engineering and what have you. Somebody else in architecture and what have you. If we brought all those together in an environment of unity, or an environment where we felt like, we're doing it for a common cause, we all rise together, we get so much further ahead. So much further ahead. I need a carpenter. Yeah, I know him. I need a lawyer. I know her. I need do you see what I'm saying? Because then we're not only using each other's...
Sorry for interrupting your podcast. I know you was well engrossed and you'll get back to it soon. But we've got a really important message that we want to give to you. Now, the likelihood is that your church needs to maximize its income. The only way, or the best way to maximize your church's income is through gift aid. Now, the likelihood is that you may not be claiming gift aid. And in many cases, you may not be maximizing if you are claiming. Now, as far as we're concerned, it's important for you to do so. And we'd love to sit and we'd love to talk with you to show you how to do that. Over the last 10 years, we have claimed over £18 million worth of gift aid for churches and faith groups across the UK. Why not be one of those? Get back to the podcast now, and we'll see you on the other side.
Like the knowledge and the skill set, but we are actually like supporting each other and growing together as well.
It's interesting because that scenario it also indirectly has a sort of checks and balances, because the way humans are is like if I'm in that environment, especially if it's like a social environment, I'm not going to want to bring my worst to that environment, because I don't want to then turn up the next week and be the one that didn't deliver, etc. So, I think a little bit of judgment, a little bit of like, well, you know what, we're all here and, we all expect the best from each other is a good thing. I like that. And I guess that's what the sorts of things that we're trying to sort of on this journey in the business of church is to try and find these systems, these practical solutions in terms of how, because a lot of these churches are out there and they've got a group of people, but they're not finding ways to put them
I have a view
together.
On this,
and to, it's like they might have a building, they've got people, you've got resources, you've got everything you need to start a business or to make something happen. And they're still like, donate, we need more donation,
It's got to be a mindset.
But it's the same thing. There's three things again. It's mindset, skill set, tool set. I'll tell you something about, I speak to churches particularly. So we've been getting, on the back of our work, particularly as we do like Premier, Gospel, we do a segment every Tuesday. So people come across our work in different ways. We've been getting invitations to come to speak at churches. And I think it's very forward-looking for the churches that are doing this, because I think if you can get your congregation to learn to steward their money better, if you can get them to understand how powerful that principle is, that, do you know what, I've only got 100 quid in my bank account, but I know how to steward that money. I know how to grow it. I know how, if I got to 1,000, I would know what to do. If I got to 10,000, I would know what to do. If you can get your congregation to understand what to do, do you know how powerful that is? No church should be starving and not be able to turn the lights on. And
that actually comes on to our next question, which is how can we improve financial literacy in the church and what's important?
This is, listen, I think as well, because sometimes, obviously, I know churches are charities and, but I think you have to also think, you have to put a different hat on when you're thinking this way, because if you want to try and get the right people in, you have to think from the perspective of, if I'm trying to invite this person to come and do a workshop or teach something, bear in mind they'll have competing requests coming from different places. I think churches need to think, if I invested, say, £500 or £1,000 or however much I need to invest to get the right resources into church to deliver something, oftentimes we don't think of what is the return I'm getting back on that. Just think about what that does for the congregation. Do you know how much more generous people would be if they could actually pay their bills and everything else and still have more left over? Because they're not feeling like they're chasing their tail all the time. They feel they have some level of financial security.
So you're saying the church should offer some value add to what they're doing, so that the people that come in there, they walk away not just spiritually enriched, but practical tools.
Absolutely.
Tools to enrich.
Absolutely. Because it's like, think about it. Churches live on contributions from congregations, and a lot of times it's not that people don't want to give. It's just that they are in a terrible place financially. Their finances just suck. They're just in a really bad place. They are too indebted. They are subscribed to the social media culture, the consumerist culture. It's just so much that's wrong with people's mindsets before they've arrived at church. So the question is how do we shift that? How
easy is that though? I mean, because even like times where we would be going out, because it's a similar thing where we've managed to onboard a church, so we've gotten over the return on investment thing we were just talking about. So now they're our client, and so they, why don't you come down or whatever, but they want to give us 10-minute slot to try and talk to the congregation, get things. It's like, look, this is important.
It begins at the top.
Exactly. If you want to get the result and you want your gift aid to increase, then everybody needs to work in a certain way. This is a team effort. So give us the time to help your congregation get the mindset right and get this process onboarded properly. But they don't really want to do that.
It starts at the top. And if the mindset isn't right at the top, then when I come along and I try and give a talk about financial maximizing income and things like that, it will not go anywhere.
No, it begins at the very top. And I can speak to one, without mentioning names, I can speak to one pastor, husband and wife team who have done this phenomenally well. They found us on we're ITV this morning. We did like a segment. They just saw us. And they were like, I really hope they're Christians. They found out we were Christians. They were like, we're getting them in. We came in to their church to do a talk to 100 couples, a conference. They gave us hours to work with 100. Just think about what that does, 100 couples. Some with children, some who are not wedded yet, some who are married and who are still to have children. The impact that had on people's... is immeasurable. Their finances and the family impact.
Their attitude.
I think we need more of that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be during church, usual church hours. It could be like we're doing this conference, we're doing this thing. But our thing is to equip people to understand. Because the Bible talks about it a lot. I mean, we talk about it in the book. There's so much in the way that God wants us to manage money. God doesn't want us to be like poor, living hand to mouth. That's not the intention. If you read, in the book we talk about the parable of, the bags of gold. There's so much to be learned from that one parable alone about preparedness, just being ready for things to happen, being able to take, what you have in your hands and do something with it rather than, your resources being depleted, but seeing your resources grow. There's just so much that we can learn from what's already in the Bible that we read every day. But I think going beyond just reading it, we need to bring it to life somehow. And oftentimes it may mean just bringing in different resources from other places, people who are who have expertise in certain areas, but with the goal of equipping the congregation, because that equips the church.
It's normally what goes into making that actually happen that I think frightens them, whether or not they look at it and think, hold on a second, we're going to have to pay for that, and we're going to have to, do you know what I mean?
But that's a mindset.
That's what I'm saying.
This is why I said everything comes up to the top, because, if you see paying for stuff as an expense, then there's a problem, depending on what you're paying for. If you're paying for certain expertise, you're paying for something that will lead to a big return, not just for the church, for example, but the congregation, then really...
That's sewing back.
That's sewing back, exactly.
Which then yields its own return.
Exactly. And I think this is the bit that we don't talk about enough, words like return and, it all sounds a bit... corporate and
like doing it for that.
Like it's about money. I can't talk about money in the church, but we need money to turn the lights on and put the pay the bills. So I think we need to again come back to mindset, which is we need to be okay talking about money. Like Jesus talked about money so many times in the Bible, using different parables, different examples. But the importance is always getting the hierarchy right, which is God comes first in everything. Everything else follows.
To good use.
But we have to be okay talking about money and not be afraid of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time in society there is a stigma about money's evil.
Yes.
It's not the money that's evil. It's the
love of
people.
money.
Well, it's what people put it to you. Exactly. If you're going to sell yourself for money, or if you're going to, so that's really good. So getting people to understand at the top, to understand the value of expertise and what it can do, because you're now sowing into your congregation, as opposed to looking at it as an expense.
Yes. It's an investment in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier in terms of understanding the value of professional services, and feeling comfortable paying for that. And I think that's often what holds them back is, I think if they making that judgment, is this person, because trust is a big thing. Often, I remember in our earlier years, people tell stories of, we trusted this member of the church, or we trusted this professional who came in and they ripped us off, or they did X, Y, and Z. So I think that your own confidence in being able to choose.
A lot of that is training people how to do their due diligence.
Exactly.
If you don't do your due diligence, a lot of the time, just because you say you're a Christian, that's enough for me.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's not enough.
Yeah. There's a lot of like wolf in sheep clothing as well.
Absolutely.
So due diligence, this is standard.
But we
you
take
need to
it
be
for granted.
shrewd. You need to do your, do your checks.
Exactly.
Make sure these people know what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing. These are some of the things that, maybe growing up in this country or whatever it is, you kind of learn that, look, there's a certain process and it's almost taken for granted. But like you say, I mean, just saying label Christian isn't enough to just say, right, this person, because it may not be that they're a bad person, they just may not be competent.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's see. So, do you want to answer the next one?
Yeah. So what are your top 3 strategies for achieving financial freedom?
Wow. Okay. One is, and they're all very simple at the core level, but one is actually living below your means. I know it sounds it's a very basic concept, but do you know how many people, I'll give you a really important, we did a case study once of a couple, like an interview, and they said, we make 10K a month net income, right? But they were struggling, really struggling to save 1K a month. Really struggling. Some months they were not able to save 1K a month. Now, 10K a month net income is a lot of money. Do you know how many people wish that this is like their dream to try to get to that sort of level, right? So lifestyle is a huge thing, so if one it doesn't matter how much you earn. You could earn £1 million, you could be spending £1 million. But if you can't live below that level of your earnings, then you're always going to be living paycheck to paycheck. That's just guaranteed. So the first is literally, am I living below the means? Because then one creates a buffer. Then I think there's power in that buffer, which is, wow, I got £800 left this month. What do I then do with it? The second principle for me then is then having your money put to work. And, that money could be put to work in different ways. It could be reducing debt, expensive debt, which is gives you a return because you're reducing interest in many ways that you're paying out, or you're actually investing that money. I was giving an illustration the other day of a particular fund that we invested in. If you'd put money into this fund without any work, simple index fund, if you'd put money into it in 2012 up until today, if you put 10K into it in 2012, it would be worth 85,000 today. That's 8.5 times your money. In 12 years. Just think about that, right? So a big part of what's necessary for people to get to a place where they feel, wow, I have freedoms financially, is to what extent is your money working every month? What is it actually invested in? And how is it able to work on itself and compound over time?
Sorry, let me just jump in there. Because I was talking to Daniel earlier today, and we established that a lot of people, and I remember for myself before I got over that, is going through a journey where you actually understand. It sounds like it's like hocus pocus, index funds, this, that, and so on and so forth. And people think back to money never sleeps, and they think that I need to have a pinstripe suit and hair like that, and be standing next to a bull in New York or whatever. But, it really is, and especially now with the internet, and especially now with apps and so on, it is really easy.
So easy.
To get into that space.
Well,
and
funny,
so
that
on.
was actually going to be my question.
Yeah.
But it was really along the lines of, there are a lot of people who will go out and they're basically using financial advisors. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so
financial advisors, or like Cory was just explaining there.
Yeah.
Let me just get on there and do some stuff myself.
There's a space for a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Usually when, two scenarios, when you have complex financial affairs, for example, multiple assets in multiple jurisdictions, you're worrying about residency in different spaces, you need somebody to offer you advice.
Yeah.
Or you have a lot of money and you're afraid to dip your toe in because one investment for you might be 100K in one go or whatever. You have quite significant numbers you're playing with.
Yeah.
You may want to speak to somebody for their advice because, when you're dealing with certain amount of money, you may have some negotiating power when it comes to the sort of people who can offer you advice, as well as, the sort of price points you can get into when you're having your money invested in a niche way. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And those problems are for the 0.1% or the 1%, right? Now, everybody else can invest their money themselves. There's no reason why you shouldn't. And that's why the work we're doing is to empower people to really get into the driving seat. Because if you can get into the driving seat for yourself,
Yes.
you would teach your partner and you would teach your children. You'd empower your household to develop this ROI mindset of seeing money work. I don't think people really understand how powerful this is until you actually do it.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, it's like starting a business. If you start a business, or a side hustle, one of the reasons people don't start things is because they haven't put their money to work. They haven't put £100 or £1,000. They haven't put it in a place where they could potentially risk losing it.
Yeah.
And because they've not done that, there's that hurdle, there's that fear. But the minute you've done it, you're like, wow. I give you an example. I always say to people, look, a lot of people have these phones. This is a Samsung phone. Somebody else in this room probably has an Apple phone. These companies, people know them every day. And people can go, oh, I might want to buy an Apple phone. They're happy to buy an Apple phone. They're happy to buy an iPad or an iMac or an iWhatever. Yeah. But if you put money just into this one company, that company could do ridiculously well, or it could just completely tank. But what if I said to you, how about if not only we put money into Apple, we put it into some of the other companies, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, Google, you put them into all these, Tesla, you put them into all these other companies, But your money is then spread across them. 6.5% goes to Microsoft, 5.4% goes to this one. Exactly. But you're benefiting from all their employees working. In every Apple shop, every single one of them working there works for you. Because they're helping the share price to go up. They're helping the company become more valuable. But better than that, you have Microsoft employees working for you and all the others.
Yeah.
Isn't that a better possibility?
Spread your risk.
Right? Because then, if one doesn't perform so well, others will, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you explain that to people and they understand it, a lot of it is, we've been conditioned into seeing investing as something very complex
And risky.
and risky. And it can be complex and risky, make no mistake.
Yeah.
But there is a way of going about it such that you reduce the complexity and make it simple, and you reduce the risk by diversifying, but still get a return on your money. And also there's the impatience when it comes to investing. A lot of us are like, oh, man,
that's not investing.
yeah,
that's gambling.
it's like, gosh, man, I want 100% return in 3 months.
Unrealistic.
Come on. Have you been a parent? Have you tried raising a child? You see how long it takes for children to grow? I've got an 11-year-old. Do you know what it's taking for us to get him to be 11 and be this tall? It's taking a lot of daily feeding, encouraging, I think parents will make quite good investors if they could think of it from that perspective, which is, it takes a while for things to happen. It takes a while for results to come about. It takes a while to write a book, to pass exams, to start a business that makes money. Things take time. And I think, tied to your point about community wealth, it's about that mindset shift as well. Nothing happens overnight. Even collaborations with people take time. It takes a while to reduce the barriers and say, oh, we now fully like you two have worked together for God knows how long, like you said. That's taking time, So I think investing there are different dimensions, but the beauty is from this thing right now in this studio, we could literally be invested across North America, China, Africa, like literally right here and right now. But before, you couldn't do that many years ago.
It's interesting. I was talking to my daughter the other day, and we was watching YouTube, and what happened was we've got an NVIDIA Shield at home, which is like a sort of TV device, and it wasn't working, and it was reinstalling it. And I was telling her the story of NVIDIA and how they are connected to AI and why their share price has sort of gone up. And she goes, "Oh, okay." She goes, so are we, we should buy shares in that, shouldn't I? I said, you've already got shares in there. I goes, yeah, it's in your ETF.
Interesting.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And she because I would show her on the app, this is the fund that I set up for you, and that's what was invested, and you can see the income. So just so that she can see it in
How
her
old
mind.
is she?
She's 13.
Okay, here's the next level to that. This week, this whole week, I've had work experience, 2 students work experience. And for 5 days, what we've taught them is 2 days of entrepreneurship and 2 days of investing. One's 15, one's 17. And yesterday, they made their first ever investments themselves, buying their own index funds and ETFs with the consent of their parents into their junior ISAs.
Yeah.
I think that action alone is one of the most significantly powerful things that could happen for them. Because once you've enabled somebody and gone, your identity has changed, you are now an investor.
Yeah.
Something really powerful happens. Because they go, wow.
You've helped them.
When did you make your first investment? I was 15.
Yeah.
Just think about that.
Yeah.
That's powerful. So literally, for your daughter, you said that, right?
Yeah.
Sit them down one day. Literally come like, we're going to do some shopping like we're doing shopping on Amazon or Sainsbury's or wherever, but we're going to buy your first ETF or your next ETF. Let them do it. Let them click the mouse. Let them walk through the whole journey. Let them do the due diligence and look and go, what are the companies in this thing? What are the fees? What's my level of risk? Let them do that whole thing. It's a 30-minute exercise. But I tell you, it will be the best gift ever for your daughter. She will never forget it.
Yeah.
She will always remember that you sat her down and walked through it. And when she gets into that adulthood and her junior ISA becomes a stocks and shares ISA, she'll carry on because the right habits have been formed.
Yeah. It's all very well me walking her through building a home computer. I need to. I need to now. When she was 5, I need to do this. Yeah, it's that's a nice one.
Yeah.
Next step.
Indeed.
Next step. How many strategies were that? So that was 2.
Oh yeah. So it's about 2.
You got one more.
So live below your means. Start investing. Now, when people start investing, a very easy way into investing is the stock market, right? However, the stock market investing, which is something everyone can do, there are other ways you can invest your money that lead to different alternative returns. Now, we all understand property, and property is very powerful. But one thing that I think we could be better at understanding as a community is understanding the different strategies for how we could approach property. Could be commercial exposure. Could be that you did just buying and selling. You're flipping and renovating. Could be that you are doing a house of multiple occupancy. Could be that you're doing different things. So my point there is the minute you become comfortable with taking some risk, you need to then pair the type of assets you invest in to align with your goal and your risk appetite. Because it's not a one-size-fits-all for everybody. Financial freedom isn't just a one-way destination. For some people, their thing is via entrepreneurship. For some people, it's pairing that with the stock market. For some people, it's pairing it with owning other assets that create income. For some people, it's taking like 5% of all their revenues and investing it in a new technology that's coming out and seeing what happens. But I think with financial freedom, getting to that journey really begins with, like I said, living below your means, really getting yourself out of expensive debt, putting your money to work, and then getting to that next level where you're actually now trying to make assets put the work for you. So ultimately, you want to outsource money making to assets. Because the minute you can do that, then you've really you've bought back your time. You can do.
And isn't that why often wealthy people have a lower tax rate than, because asset income is taxed lower than working income.
Yeah.
And that's why, Rishi Sunak's average tax rate last year was 23% or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, assets produce different kinds of income, whether it's dividend income, whether it's interest income, or whether it's you're taxing capital gains, which again is a different rate of tax to income tax. And assets can be put into structures. You could put them into limited companies. You could put them into trusts. You could put them into different things that mean that.
Yeah. Be more tax efficient.
you're a lot. And here's a really interesting thing about that is a lot of these things are legal. They're actually created by.
They're all legal.
They're all
not tax
exactly.
avoidance.
It's exactly evasion.
Or evasion.
Yeah. So it's about finding the right vehicles. It's like an ISA, stocks and shares ISA. It's you can go on the government website and read about it and open one for yourself.
Yeah.
But you don't get taxed at all of every penny you put into that account. There's no income tax on it. There's no capital gains tax. There's no. Eventually there will be inheritance tax. A pension. There's no inheritance tax on a pension if someone passes away by the age of 75. A lot of really wealthy people use pensions as tax planning to generational wealth, to pass on wealth to their children. So it's just about knowing, it's like, when I came out of Hanger Lane Station, which exit should I take? And where would this exit lead me to, right? A lot of that is foresight. In fact, a lot of generational wealth is actually about passing on processes, systems, knowledge. Here's how you do this. Here's this person. Here's the family accountant.
Exactly.
Here's family accountant. We've worked with him for the last 40 years. He knows what to do. He has all the documents for X, Y, and Z. He has the will. It's about those things.
Yeah. And a lot of people just look at that as taking life too seriously. It's because it's and if you imagine if you're somebody who may have gone to school and not necessarily done great at school or whatever, you're going to look at that conversation and like they say, you're either going to yawn and fall asleep, or for some people it's just out there. That's for
someone else.
That's for those people that have got that ability in it. And often enough, it's not you're not going to embrace all levels. Like you say, the path is different. Different people. I mean, I know for you I listened to one of your podcasts, and I can remember, you've got stocks and shares in various different things, businesses, the nurseries, et cetera, Humble Penny, and so on and so forth. So it's not that you're not working.
Oh, I'm working all the time.
You're doing the things that you want, and you're working on your assets.
Thank you. It's literally that. I'm choosing how I use my time. Like I chose to come here on this podcast, or I chose to just yesterday working on a renovation event with somebody else. Just different things happen. I think it's about being in control of your time. One of the most frustrating things we can have is a life where you don't feel like you're in control of your time in many ways. You feel like I have to always be there. Someone's dictating everything. I don't have a lot of freedoms. I want to go to my son's event at school or whatever, but I can't because I have to be at this thing. And so I found for me, I live a very simple life, but the thing I value the most is that freedom of time to be able to say, next month we're taking August off. That's why I want any podcast, I want it in July, just so I can take some time out with my family and just do stuff. And I think this is something everyone can create in different ways, because we all have, a lot of us are wealthier than we think. We're wealthy in time, but we don't use the time very well. A lot of us are mega distracted. Do you know how distracted people are today? Everywhere there's a distraction. Everywhere. Phones, everywhere. Quickly. So that wealth you've got, that time that, think about it, the most wealthy people are trying to buy back time. That's really what their
number one goal.
One of their number one goals is to buy back time. But people waste that time a lot through distractions. So a lot of us who really optimize our lives well are a lot wealthier than we think, because if you buy back a lot of your time by avoiding a lot of distractions, you can put it to really good use. It could be improving your home, could be improving your knowledge, could be spending time with the right people to get mentoring, to get guidance. So a lot of, in fact, it's very biblical actually. A lot of the solutions to our lives are already in our hands. but we just don't realize it in many ways. It's about asking, kind of pausing, asking like, how else could I do this life? How else could I design it in a way that works for me?
You know what? I mean, I think there's actually one other question which I actually really do like. So I'm going to ask it. But, you know, I was just thinking what you said there really does hinge. And I sense from you that you have a lot of natural discipline. Right. And that's what I've noticed, especially in the latter part of my years, is that if there was any gift that I would like to be born with, is discipline. Because with that, you can do anything. You can achieve anything.
Oh, yeah.
Sticking to something.
Yeah.
You know, the times where you were, I can't be bothered. No, get it done, and so on. So I think, you know, that's, if anybody's listening to this and thinking, I'd love to do that, but I know me, I'll start on that thing. Then there are other tools out there that will help you work on your discipline. If you need that first, work on that. And then,
well, I tell you, in fact, one of the things you talk about in your book is having an accountability partner.
Yep.
Right. But the problem that I see a lot out there is people don't really want to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And so what it is, they have ideas, and you'll have found it where you talk to people and you're like, you could do this or you could do that, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to do X and I'm going to do Y.
Gonna.
They never ever do it. And that's because
call them the Ghana generation.
Yeah, and that's because they have nobody to hold themselves accountable. One of the things we had as we were coming up was we always had each other holding ourselves accountable. If I was going to do something, he wanted to know where that was and how it was X months down the line. And I can't remember if I was talking to you, Kat, one day or whatever, and I may have just been saying something along the lines of, you know, things that I want to do, I put them out there.
I do.
You know what I mean? In fact, you taught me that. Funny enough, because we used to sit down. Funny enough, sort of part of the cultural or the heritage that sort of came down to me one time is your parents always say, you don't tell anybody about what you're doing. You know, people always want to see bad for you. They always want to such and such and such. It's one of those sort of old messages. You sometimes wonder where they actually come from, but it's a generational thing, I'm sure. I remember one day talking to you and you're like, well, who's going to take it from you? No one's going to take anything from you. Ultimately, you just have to be mindful about who you're telling. You know, so the people you respect and trust and so on. But you do need people to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And without that, you know, you can almost forget it.
Yeah, I mean, you're on the world stage now because you are out on YouTube doing your thing.
I've never thought of it that way, actually.
The world is holding you accountable.
Stage.
No, but this is the thing, you know, and funny enough, you know, when I think about the amount of black people that are on YouTube and what they're doing, etc., I do sometimes sense that there's a fear to put your head above the parapet.
Yeah.
Because you know, if you do that, then you're going to be like and you know, if you're less than perfect, if you're less than such, then you know you're gonna. But you know, it's something. It's like I say, it's like what you've been discussing, and we've been discussing about that mindset shift. And so, look, you know, it's just a mindset shift.
Yeah.
And if you can get over that, then there's a new world that is open to you.
Do you know what's interesting about YouTube? Actually, I'll just talk about that briefly. You will, of course, have noticed there's a big shift in our viewing habits. In a lot of us are consuming a lot less traditional TV, and we're consuming a lot more YouTube and that sort of thing. You know, it's really interesting because if you think about it, like in 10 years from now, YouTube will be like so much bigger compared to normal TV. So I honestly think I think it's one of for me personally, it's our number one place where it's our number one broadcast. My video editor once, our older video editor that we used to have, once got me to realize, he said to me, Ken, this is like your BBC. This is like your broadcast. Like people are waiting for your content. You have to take it that seriously. And it really sunk in. He said, this is your broadcast. You know, every one of us has something to say, a God-given ability, a voice, a message, a collection of abilities and talents. But I feel like we are so worried about what other people think of us that we don't let that message come out. And everybody has a message. Some people are like, I remember when we were starting the Humble Pen, we were like, well, why do you want to do that? You know, it's been done. There's many other people talking about this stuff. You know, and one of the biggest mindset shifts I had, because back then I didn't think I was a creative person at all. I thought I'm just a numbers guy. But I've had to embrace that I'm made in God's image, and with that comes my creative ability. But bigger than that, I've got a unique story and a unique voice. And I think everyone else listening to this should embrace that reality, because platforms like YouTube are literally life-changing. Just think about it. Like yesterday, and it speaks to this consistency point, one of the things I'm so religious about is making sure we publish every week, right? And I'm publishing good quality stuff. Yesterday, we published a video. Just think about that idea that I could sit in this room, a bit like this podcast, and publish something, and it goes out and it has the power to change people's lives without, like, I'm not asking for anyone's permission. Like, oh, let me write to production team or write to this person. Or I'm literally like, I've just made it. I'm like, yeah, okay, click publish. That's it. Then the world starts to engage with it. That's a very, very powerful thing.
See, you see it now.
Oh, well, I see it.
You see it now, and you see the power. But, you know, for most people who are on that other side, where they're thinking to themselves, when I hit that publish, the world is going to judge me. If I say something that's foolish, the world, you know, because you know comments in that, they're going to let you know, they're going to put you straight.
But people will always have something to say.
Yeah,
even if you said the most, like, even if I read the Bible, which is like, this is what God said. Even if I read that,
there'll be something
people
going
will
like
still
that.
say, people will, I'll say, oh, I didn't say this. Jesus said it. Like I'm reading what he said. People will still have something to say, because that's just how the world works.
King James,
this is how the world works. People will always have something to say. But I think there's something special about that. We shouldn't be afraid of it. It's almost like, okay, people will have something to say. That's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's okay.
They should have
Democracy,
something to say.
Democracy.
That's normal. We're having a dialogue.
Well, at least people are listening.
Yeah, you don't have to agree with everything I say. You know, and I'm okay to listen to what you have to say, but I've learned over time not to let it affect me. Or I literally see it as, this is my work. You know, this is the work that Maria and I are doing. It's a mission. We're trying to help people. And the people, it's like, you know, sowing seed on good ground. The people who receive it, who truly want it to help them.
Sorry to interrupt your podcast. I just want to talk to you a little bit about our mobile apps. We have two apps, a management app and a member app. They're perfect for helping you run your church, stay in touch with your members, raise funds, and grow your community. So if you're looking for a mobile app solution, get in touch with Good to Give. We have the perfect solution for you. Now back to the podcast.
It will help them. The people who it's not for will just go and watch another video. Or,
absolutely.
you know, do something else.
Yeah.
But there is power. Like, you know, I'm saying that to really say that, like, you know, don't underestimate how powerful places like YouTube are. You know, like, you'd be amazed. Like, do you know YouTube ranks so high on search results because they're owned by Google? Search. If I searched your I remember searching before I came here 2 days ago. I searched for your charity, your company. Your video, some interview you guys did, where somebody was interviewing you saying, "Oh, you're gonna start a podcast." It was last year. Came up on Google.
Okay.
I didn't even know you made a YouTube video, and I clicked on it from Google and went straight to just to show you how powerful YouTube is. You know, it's really it has a very high domain authority, which means that when people search for stuff, those videos come up right at the very top. So publishing YouTube videos, man, it goes very far.
Yeah. And the thing is you put good content out there, it keeps working for you. It's like an asset.
Yes.
It keeps working for you in the background, absolutely. Right, so let me just ask this last question, and then I will like to ask you my standard question,
Come on.
which is about AI.
Okay.
Because I'm, you know, you mentioned NVIDIA, so I know you know a few things. How do we solve the wealth inequality and close the wealth gap?
Okay, there are, and this is a really tough question because there are different wealth gaps, really. You know, there are ethnicity wealth gaps, gender wealth gaps. It's just different things. Pension wealth gaps. It's just different gaps that exist. And on one hand, I could argue that you could never really solve it. That's on one hand. Why? Because I say that because money compounds. Just to give you an example, right? You got two people. One person has £1 million. One person has £100. They invest in the same thing. They both get a 7% annual return on average. The rule of 72 says you take 10.2 years for their money to double. The £1 million goes to 2 million. The £100 goes to £200. How will you ever close that gap? Never. It's just maths, logic. This is what happened during COVID. The rich got richer simply by just having money, right? That's one perspective. However, there are things that can be done to, reduce the gap. Not close it completely, but reduce the gap. And this is where policymakers step in. This is where, you could argue, governments step in. And this is where organizations, companies step in. This is where it starts to get a little bit political. But you could also argue this is where community initiatives step in. And this is where I'm very interested in this kind of thing. I'll give you an example, right? I would love a world where, because just speaking here, for example, a world where I could, or we could help every, I don't know, call it Christian household or black household or the different communities, get them to all open a stocks and shares ISA and make their first investment, right? It might sound like such a simple thing.
You're talking grassroots.
But do you know how much work will be required to make that happen? To get people to get to that point where they're like, you know what, we need to actually do this. We need to level up in this space to close a particular gap, right?
You know what? It just dawned on me. I thought to myself, that's something that, all the churches, we're always talking about what sort of value add, what sort of workshops could churches be doing for their members, their members, etc. Something like that.
Yeah.
Like everyone this Sunday, everyone, right, these are the steps. So everybody get out your phones, we're going to download this app and such and such and such. We're going to walk you through this step. And by the time we leave today, everybody's going to think...
Regardless of whether you have £1
exactly.
or
£10 or £100.
Whatever the case
you're
is.
going to do that. That's the sort of thing that they should be doing.
But it requires quite brave leadership, actually, to do that, because there are many competing problems that people have. And for some people, it's how do I keep the lights on? For some people, it's how do I book my next holiday? There's just different things that people have going on. But it requires certain people to go, well, actually, our big problem we're trying to solve is the wealth gaps that exist. And here are a set of half a dozen initiatives that will help to reduce the wealth gap, having done X number of research. Take, for example, there was some research recently that I was reading by, I'm trying to remember the name of the charity. They looked at ethnicity, how much people had in their ISAs by ethnicity.
Oh, right.
You'd be very surprised, really.
I'm not surprised.
Just by, just how much people in our communities have. So it's next to nothing on average, So having data helps to close wealth gaps. And the problem is there isn't a lot of data that's collected by ethnicity, for example. The Office for National Statistics has certain data. For example, you can look at net worth by ethnicity. You can look at home ownership by ethnicity. So one key starting point is who is going to collect the data? Or the people who have the data, can they please present it in a way that helps us to understand? I'll give you an example. It's going to sound really weird, but for my YouTube channel, I don't even know who watches the YouTube channel by ethnicity. I'm just giving you an example. I don't know, because it's not presented that way. I know how many male and female. I know how many people are by age, but I don't know how many people by what communities they come from. So one thing is data sets. How do we get the right data sets that will help us be informed about what's going on? Because then we can measure things. We can go, oh, wow, this is how big this is a problem. Or this is, I take pension wealth gaps. I think the pension wealth gap at the moment between men and women is about 35% on average, right? Because you could measure it. You're able to say, how do we reduce 35% to 15% or 20% or whatever, right? And government and policymakers can then start to put in place certain things to encourage, for example, more women to invest a certain proportion of their income, or to reduce certain things that lead to that. For example, the imbalances in the fact that women raise children or have children raise children, men carry on working. How do you create a better balance so that, you don't have a compounding wealth gap? You're able to close it down a little bit. So
information.
Yeah, it's data. It's this leadership. You need people need to own problems. I've made financial literacy my problem. Like, I'm owning it. I'm raising my hand up. Mary and I, we're trying to help people solve the problem.
Yeah.
But I can't own every problem. You know, other people have to go, I own this other problem. I own that other problem. And you know, we were talking about this on a WhatsApp group recently, and it's weird. Like, this is so different, but I want to just talk about it. In schooling and kids and schooling, right? I was chatting to some Asian parents recently, and they were like, oh yeah, like, we're part of this WhatsApp group, and like when we go running or walking and like we see a house near a grammar school, like we take a picture of it and we post it in the group, and other people in the community buy the house. So that way, like, their kids get into the schools, right? You think, wait, hang on a sec. They chose to make that their problem.
Yeah.
Are you understanding what I'm saying? They chose to say, do you know what? We're going to do something here.
Their community benefit.
Exactly, right? So my point is, someone has to, you know, if no one makes problems their own, they don't take responsibility for them, nothing much happens. It's a bit like wealth building. It's like personal wealth in a household. I always say in our book, we talk about this idea of the home CFO. The home CFO is the person in the household who goes, do you know what? This household finances is my problem. I'm like, you're all having fun and like eating the dinner and like leaving your plates unwashed and doing what you have to do. But I'm making finances my problem. I'm making sure the bills are paid. I'm making sure money goes into the junior ISA. I'm making sure the home insurance renews. I'm making sure the will is written. I'm making sure life insurance exists and is in trust. Somebody has to make it their problem. The same things apply to wealth gaps. And you could then start to speak about, you know, charities, individuals, policymakers, governments.
Where was, you know, the thing is, you say all that, and I can understand how daunting that must be for, like, you know, the average Joe. You're going out, you're doing your work, you're coming home, you're thinking, now I've got to be a CFO and I've got to learn all of this sort of stuff.
Don't you think that it's kind of assumed, though? There's it's assumed that somebody takes that role, but they just don't do a good role because they're not learned in terms of that role.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a basic version of that where I pay the bills and, you know, it goes out the account. That's the basic version. But I think to myself, you know, when I was younger, I used to think, you know, oh, you got a financial advisor. They would bring all of that knowledge, etc. And then you find they just want to sell you policies, right? And you think to yourself, and now what YouTube and why I love the internet, it brings people like yourself into you know, the lens of everybody to say, well, hold on a minute, there is somebody out there that can actually coach me, can actually tell me about all of these different things, because it's like, and you know, where was that knowledge? You know, why wasn't that an important thing for, you know, young people growing up to be taught about? Or why can't you even, as just a normal person, you know, you kind of think, oh, I should be doing something. Why can't you just go to some sort of agency, some sort of company, right? Can I meet a financial advisor? Right. They sit you down and then they take you through that. You pay a bit of money, but they set it all up for you and they help you manage it. I mean, it's like that service doesn't really exist. You've got to have your own internal person who's going to own it and actually do that groundwork.
But it's almost as if that was reserved for a certain type of person.
Well,
that's what it felt like.
You could. The thing I've always said is that wealth building is about doing admin. A lot of people. I say to people, have you ever shredded before? If you can shred, you can do admin, right? And admin's very important. You know, like being able to fill in a form, being able to make a phone call, stay on the phone. Someone's kept you waiting, and you're waiting. That's admin, right? And I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, world building is like shiny, you know, investing, the stocks, everything's charting up, and there's that perspective. But honestly, a lot of it is actually, wow, like, where's the life insurance? Is it like, who knows the password to log into? If something happened to him, who knows how to log into the bank account to get the money? Like, I've known people to pass away and their wife doesn't know how to log into their joint account. There's so, you know, this is this kind of stuff. This is the boring admin that nobody wants to do. But without doing the admin, not very much happens. Opening an ISA takes time. Putting your national insurance number, typing it in, making sure direct debit's set up and is automated. That takes time. Doing your bookkeeping, business owners, bookkeeping. Do you know, I know many people who run small businesses who don't know how much they're making. They don't know. They don't know. Have you made profit this year? This month? I don't know. I've been selling stuff and I've been spending money, but have you made a profit or a loss? Don't know. Why don't you know? I've not done my bookkeeping. Do you know what bookkeeping is? No, I don't know. You know. So this is what I mean, right? So, but without that personal responsibility, and this comes to I talk about distractions a lot because a lot of people don't know that that's the enemy. The distraction is the enemy. There's so many things that's taking your precious time away.
Yeah.
If you could say, in my typical ideal day, here are the things I want to do.
Yes.
And you actually do those things. Do you know how much progress you have?
Yeah.
If you actually said, oh, someone sent me this thing on WhatsApp, I've not looked at it. I've just ignored it. I've just not looked at it.
The man with discipline.
I'm telling you, and I often, when I'm sitting down at a computer, this system that you damn well put in place is pinging me every 2 seconds. I'm telling you, so much distraction. If it's not your CRM, if it's not your WhatsApp, if it's not your text. I actually switched a lot of the alerts off.
Yeah.
And now the new distraction is I then get a phone call and say, I sent you a text. You know,
Put it on aeroplane mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, another thing, at night time, I've been toying with the idea, and I've got to work on my discipline for this, but I've actually been thinking from 9 o'clock of an evening, I just put it on airplane mode and leave it until 7 o'clock the next morning. Because I'll be honest with you, there's nothing really happening that's that important that I'm going to need to deal with.
I told someone recently in a conversation that I didn't look at WhatsApp for a weekend, and they were shocked. Do you know how much peace you have not looking at instant messaging?
Believe me,
for like a period of time.
I know exactly. Yesterday when I went to meet Rodney and that lot up by Monument and stuff, I didn't take my headphones. I had my phone, but I didn't have my headphones. So normally I kind of walk along. And just the walk from my house to the station with nothing peaceful, just walking, and it's like it was cleansing. So I do think the detox, I do think having rules, having boundaries, making sure that, you know what, between this time and this time, like you say, I think my phone automatically goes onto silent mode at a certain time. I think it's about 11, maybe about 10:30, 11. It just goes onto silent. So yeah, I think I totally understand that. And as you was talking about data, it's a good segue into AI, right? Because when you hear me talk about AI, the podcast is starting to wrap up because that's usually the last, last question, right? What's your so you're in the content creation space, so there's a lot of stuff going on in AI. So if you're not utilizing it, what's your current take? I mean, the general question is, how do you think it's going to impact society in general?
Sure.
But if we can get more geeky, if you want.
So I think it, like all new things that come into play, it will have the bits that it will obviously negatively affect a lot of people. It will definitely replace certain people's activities or work. Take people who normally do copywriting, for example, or do certain admin tasks, or even other things. It will definitely, there'll be a replacement that happens. But I also think it's very, very powerful for speeding things up and really like planning things, and like taking my YouTube video and turning it into a blog post in 60 seconds. Like I am using I'm using the tools in that sort of direction.
Making more productive.
Making things more productive, using it to just improve my research and planning. I made a video the other day. I'm like, what would be a great thumbnail title? What would that look like? And why? What would you rank this thumbnail title versus this one out of 10? And why? Which one will give me the highest click-through rates? And why? That granularity in using the tools is powerful, because then you're able to go, wow, it's just helping me as though I've got another team member.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, no, I totally. I mean, people, how you use AI is key. For example, you can take your whole inbox with a conversation. You've got a client for over like 2 or 3 years. You could take your whole inbox, dump it in a context window, and say, not that you want to do it in certain things, but if you could find a secure one, you dump it in there and just ask the AI, what am I missing with my client? What type of client is this? You know, how can I improve my relationship with a client? Or, you know, if you're a salesperson, you can have sales pitches specifically tailored to that individual who you're going to see by having the AI. But the key thing that a lot of people are starting to realize now, if you want to get the best out of AI, is about understanding how to be a prompt engineer and how to think. Because there's a difference between just going into the standard context window and just saying, can you do X, Y, and Z? So the next level up is, all right, pretend you're a specialist in this, and now acting. But then, you know, being able to get down back to the system level, which is the prompt behind the prompt, which means that everything that you send in the normal prompt goes through the lens of the standard. So, you know, if you use any of the AIs out there, large language models out there, they have a way of communicating and talking, which, you know, if you do copy, you'll look at it and think, that's done on an AI. You can see, if you don't season it up a bit, it's going to be obvious, right? But you can get around that by putting in like a system prompt. And then once you, so like on ChatGPT, it's called a GPT. So if you then do it at that level, what you can then do is tell the AI, always be this way, and this is the sort of person that you will be. So whether it's a financial advisor, I want you to be able to look at, I'm going to dump in a spreadsheet, or I'm going to dump in a load of bank statements.
Sure.
You are now a financial advisor who's the greatest one. You're Ken. You know, look at all his blogs, etc., etc. And now I want you to advise me as though you're Ken about my finances. And then if you save that GPT, you then can always go back to it and say, right, let me speak to Ken. And you don't have to tell it to go and do that research. You don't have to tell it to go and think. It just, now you just have your own sort of AI Ken.
Yeah.
And then you just talk to Ken and say, look, this is situation. What's the, advise me on that. And I was listening to a podcast, and it was saying there's this new guy, give him a little plug. It's a platform called Margie. And what they've done is they've created like an environment where you can save these sort of personas.
Okay.
And you can also, and it's connected to all of the top models that are out there, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude. I've been using a lot of Claude recently. And, you know, so you can then sort of just plug into these different things. So if, for example, your workflow, you know, all right, tell Ken to speak to the copywriter GPT, and then you guys discuss this, and then let me know what the result is. So you're now getting sort of like one AI to kind of talk with another AI to discuss, or two different personas, right? You've done your work, now you give it to this one. What do you think? Or you're the CEO, or let's say you had a
basically building a team.
Yeah, you can build a team, and you know, and I think that if you understand where it's going and you take that approach, that all feeds into what you're saying. I could be more productive. I can now, rather than having to, you know, sort of just cobble together something, the quality of my work can get to a next level, another level, and so on. So that's how I see it. And in terms of society, I think, you know, humans are always find, like every invention, they find a way to put it to use. And yet there's always going to be some people that are left behind for a generation as things move forward.
Sure.
But generally, I think society will evolve, and I hope that the younger generation, the generations coming behind us, really learn to embrace the new amount of time that they're going to have on their hands and put that time to good use.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's weird how, like, you can remember like a world before the internet, then the internet, or a world before social media, then social media. The thing is that I'm thinking about my kids, like they don't really know a world very much before the AI world. So I just hope that they do see it as something that is, you know, an advantage for their generation, and they can see how to use it. You know,
I think there will be, like you said, there's going to be issues that are going to happen because there's going to be people who just don't embrace it. But I do think, especially at the ages of your children, I think that by the time they grow up, they will grow up with intelligent edge devices where they'll be just like, where's the voice button? Can you just, they'll be talking to devices because that's what they expect, and it will be a lot more natural for them. But I think that, you know, in the same way like your brother's a digital nomad, you know, that is where I see society generally going. People are going to be more freer because and like, you know, tax regime in this country a bit flaky. They're not tied to countries. Some of the boundaries will start to abate, and AI and being productive is going to empower people to be, you know, over there working and being able to, you know, create value, because that's where you know, money usually comes from. You've created something that has value, right? And I think that that generation, they're going to be freer than we've ever been. Because if it gets to a certain stage, it's either going to be universal basic income, or it's going to be that everybody monetizes who they are. So, you know, nearly everybody's going to be on some sort of social media, and they only need to find the 0.0% of the world that's interested in what they're doing, and that's monetized enough for them to have a lifestyle, or, you know, to be able to live. So, you know, the fact that we're sitting here, you're a YouTuber, you know, 5 years ago, that wasn't a reality. 10 years ago, that wasn't even a thing. Now, most kids, when you ask them what they want to be, it's a footballer, it's a YouTuber, or it's in music. So you know, you're living the life that people.
Do you know what? I just think it's so interesting. I never thought I'd be doing anything. I don't even call myself a YouTuber. I do so many different things. Like, you know, I'm an investor, I'm a blogger, I'm a writer, I'm an entrepreneur. There's just so many different. I'm an accountant. It depends on the lens. I think of myself as a creator of value. You know, I could be out of this. I could be like, you know, after this meeting, I'm doing something else that's completely related to something else. So I think it's a future of portfolio work, really. You know, we're kind of heading in that direction.
Fractional.
Where, everyone's kind of doing, you know, your week might be 5 different activities, or 5 different clients, or 5 different businesses, or 5 different, you know.
Productivity.
Yeah, like different, depending on what lens you're looking through. And I just think that's powerful. I think that's really powerful, because you have a lot more independence, and, you know.
Your kids will be doing it on stage.
I guess this is why people are looking into second passports, you know. Because, you know, the next level is like, okay, like, where do I want access to in the world, and what would it cost me to have that access? And
absolutely,
you know,
passport heavy.
Yeah, like this is literally it. This is the
good YouTube.
This is the next. It's the next thing, you know.
Yeah, there are a few good YouTubers out there that do talk about what it's like to live in other countries, tax regimes, and the benefits, etc., of working in other countries. And I do think, you know, I've got a number of cousins that, you know, in Dubai or various different countries. So our generation, I don't see them, like I said, sticking like stuck to the UK or whatever. So they're going to be global.
But this is where you need advice as well. Like, there's complexity in that simplicity, where you're like, yeah, it could be anywhere, but it's a lot of complexity as well, because like, oh, okay, where am I resident or domiciled? Where are my assets, and where do I pay tax? And like, there's just stuff, and this is where you need advice, basically.
Yeah, specialists to help you.
Yeah.
Well, look, you know, we've had the thumb, so we know that that time. But Ken, you know, really like to thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
You know,
Thank you, guys.
Amazing pearls of wisdom.
An absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Absolutely. And I hope you guys out there have got a lot of value from what's been spoken about here today. And you know why we do what we do. This is the business of church. And our goals are really to help you and unlock some value. And hopefully anything that you've learned from here, take it and help others spread that word. So you know what to do. Like, subscribe to all of our channels, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Business of Church. Take care.
Thank you.